Good morning. My name is Peggy Lagodny, and I'm a worship associate here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Cleveland. Welcome. For those of you who are new to this congregation or who are tuning in for the first time this morning, please let me take a moment to introduce to you who we are. Unitarian Universalist congregations are unlike many other spiritual groups in that we don't have a common creed that defines what we believe. You will find that Unitarian Universalist beliefs cover the spectrum: Christian, pagan, agnostic, Buddhist, atheist, humanist, and a few I'm not sure what I amists. What we share is a common set of values, a covenant about how we should treat each other and the world. We share values such as inclusion, upholding the worth of each individual, and affirming democracy. Our congregation is a welcoming congregation. This means that we welcome everyone to join us, no matter your color, your ability, your age or financial status, no matter your place on the gender spectrum, whoever you love, whoever you are, wherever you come from. We're glad you're here with us today. Our minister, Reverend Joe Shere, is on study leave. Today's service will be led by Reverend Dr. Rina, Shere, Commissioned Lay Minister Amy Collins, and me. Join us as we explore themes around liberty and freedom.
We light this chalice, symbol of our faith alive in this world, naming our vision of collective liberation and daring to remember each other into beloved community. We invite you into worship with this definition to ponder. From Wikipedia. In modern politics, liberty is the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. Freedom is more broad in that it represents a total lack of restraint or the unrestrained ability to fulfill one's desires. Come, let us worship together.
I invite you now to join me for what some call prayer and others call mindful meditation. Today's prayer was written by the Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Tania Marquez, and she has entitled it, Do Not Fear Agitation. Please join me in this moment of holiness. Do not fear agitation, for agitation is the rhythm of life itself, to be put into motion and to be stirred. Do not fear the movements that decenter us, that pull us from all that we thought was permanent. You carry within you the center of understanding, the compass to show you the way. Carry with you the love that will hold you, the vision that will guide you, the relationships to all the beings in the world that will ground you. Go in peace and in gentle agitation. Stir the world into love. May it be so. Amen.
Artists can help us see the world in so many different ways. Music, singing, poetry, the visual arts can help us access ideas and emotions in ways that we can't describe with words. That's why we need art. Our social justice efforts are often amplified and can be propelled and communicated in ways that words can't do justice. And because with art we have this ability to imagine what the world might be like in ways that go beyond mere writing or speaking. There's a connection that happens with us, both internally and externally, when we are engaging with different art forms. I have been greatly impacted by the Chinese dissident artist Ai Weiwei and his many different kinds of works of art that have called me to pay attention to ideas and to freedom and to what we are allowed to say and not say, and who decides what is truth. He has really helped me understand ideas of personal freedom and liberty much more deeply than if I had never engaged with his artworks. Ai Weiwei was the son of a revered Chinese poet who, during the Cultural Revolution, was sent to a re-education camp in the far western reaches of China. Weiwei was only 1 year old when this happened, and so he basically spent most of his life, the first 20 years, growing up in Chinese gulags with his family and watching his father undergo severe hardship, all for his freedom of speech, holding fast to his idea that he would write his poetry, recite his poetry, and publish his poetry that was often critical of the Chinese government. Ai Weiwei himself has been in prison and beaten many times, once so severely that he required emergency brain surgery. But he has remained an outspoken critic of the Chinese government as well. And throughout his troubles, Weiwei has commented that one of the things that gives him strength is he remembers watching his father and seeing how his father persevered. He remembers the conscience that kept his father's dignity intact during all those years in the camps. Weiwei works in many mediums, in sculpture, ceramics, film, video, photography, music, and very large-scale art installations. In 2014, he was invited to create a large art installation at Alcatraz, our old federal prison. Weiwei's goal was to highlight the plight of thousands of imprisoned persons from around the world who have risked their personal safety and sometimes that of their family members because they are driven to speak truth to power. Now, the site Alcatraz is obviously not a coincidence. It was once a military prison. Alcatraz has a long history of protest. In the late 1900s, Alcatraz imprisoned Hopi elders who refused to send their children to United States government-run schools because they knew that their children would lose any access to their native languages and traditions. During World War I, Alcatraz held conscientious observers from around America. And in 1969, when it was finally closed as a prison, it was taken over by Native American freedom fighters seeking justice for, for indigenous peoples. I had the opportunity while I was on Alcatraz to visit all of the different parts of the installation that were in various parts of the prison. And one of the installation pieces that resonated deeply with me was entitled Stay Tuned. And Stay Tuned is actually a sound installation. 12 prison cells in what was once the A block of Alcatraz, so the massive concrete main cell house. And I, Weiwei, chose 12 of these cells all in a row, and they were open for visitors to enter. And in each cell was only one stool, so you could sit or stand. And you would be hearing the spoken word or the music or the poetry created by people who have been detained for speaking their truth, and sometimes the work might have even been created while they were imprisoned. So you could encounter protesters as diverse as Pussy Riot from Russia, who sang to oppose the tactics of Vladimir Putin, or the Robben Island singers, who were incarcerated during apartheid-era South Africa. The voices of political prisoners from around the globe can be heard singing and talking and reciting poetry in what was once a very silent area of the prison, because for many years, talking by the prisoners was not permitted on Alcatraz. I heard these verses from Pussy Riot when they protested Putin and the complicity of the leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church in Putin's agenda. These were words that were sung at Moscow's Cathedral of Christ the Savior. Virgin Mother of God, put Putin away. Put Putin away. Put Putin away. Black robes, golden epaulettes, all parishioners crawl to bow. The phantom of liberty is in heaven. Gay pride sent to Siberia in chains. The head of the KGB, their chief saint, leads protesters to prison under escort in order not to offend His Holiness. 2 members of Pussy Riot were imprisoned for 2 years after this song. In another cell, I listened to the music of Victor Jara, a Chilean singer and songwriter. In the days following the U.S.-backed military coup of September 1973, he was arrested, imprisoned, and ultimately murdered. Yet his voice and words live on in this installation. He sings, "My guitar is not for the rich, no, nothing like that. My song is the ladder we are building to reach the stars. For a song has meaning when it beats in the veins of a man who will die singing, truthfully singing his songs." While you are listening to the voices, you are inhabiting the cell and imagining what your life would be like as a prisoner. You can only look at the walls or your own hands or your legs and you hear the murmured voices of not only the recording in your cell, but kind of the whispers, almost like ghosts of the cells that are down the way from you. It is a completely immersive experience, and you're really compelled to examine your own conscience and to think, what would I be willing to lose to sustain my ideal of liberty and freedom? Ai Weiwei says that this show is about freedom. He says, I have an obligation to speak out on their behalf. Weiwei's installation calls each of us to ask the question, what is my obligation? We continue to see our personal liberty becoming more and more at risk here in America. When unnamed police roam the streets of our city and can fire weapons and pick up people at will, this is the beginning of life in a police state. I must ask myself, and I'm asking you, to think very deeply about what enslaves each of us that stops us from working for liberation for others, or even working for liberation for yourself. What keeps you from living out your conscience? We must continue to ask this question and to support each other so that we can be brave and continue to take those steps to protest and to speak out, and for some of us, putting our bodies on the line to ensure that the right of conscience and the use of the democratic for all, for everyone in this society. So may it be.
As Rina, Peggy, and I met and brainstormed on the topics of liberty and freedom, I was asked to consider what kind of world would I want to have Leilani, my daughter, live in. We can assess progress around social progress, equal rights for all, by looking back through history, looking at legislative progress, and trying to compare then with the current social norms. Today's recent events have focused laser attention on Black and Brown lives, and by extension, all of the many other prejudices and disparities that plague our nation. I find myself both hopeful and fearful. I'm hopeful that things have finally become bad enough, undeniable enough, to drag our society from complacency to force us to make real progress. I'm fearful, after such a chronic pattern of violence and disparity in the treatment of Black and Brown people, that this will still not be enough to overcome such a long pattern of dysfunction. When you're a parent or are close enough to a child or children to feel invested in their future, the state of our future is no longer an abstract. When we first raised a child, our first child, she became part of our family at the age of 9. We didn't teach her to talk or walk or use the potty. Early trauma was a powerful barrier to lessons we tried to teach her about love, trust, and self-worth. With our second child, in our home since she was 3 weeks old, we see the absolute trust, uninhibited affection, unquashed curiosity, and self-possessed confidence of a 3-year-old who is as yet unencumbered with the prejudices that await her in the world. This contrast makes us feel the burden of responsibility that comes with having such foundational impact on the life of another developing person. What if Leilani never had to learn that there are those that will expect less from her because she is a girl and will one day be a woman? What if
she never had to worry about governments attempting to legislate decisions she makes about her body? What opportunities might she imagine for herself if she never learned that to be brown-skinned meant that she is somehow less than and not safe, that she needs to constantly monitor herself in the face of authority, that her direct gaze may be interpreted as a challenge or a sign of disrespect? What if she never had to face a look of hatred, judgment, or disgust directed at her for her skin color, her gender identity, or other outward expression of who she is? If she were truly at liberty to be anything and anyone, she might decide to be an astronaut, a cosmetologist, an artist, or an engineer, or all of the above. She might decide to be a parent, a spouse, or live in a cloistered community. All indications of her personality suggest she will not choose to live in isolation, but she should be able to choose. I know we can't protect her from experiencing some or all of those barriers to her potential. With every year that passes, as her independence grows, our control will diminish over her circles of association. I try to surround her with a village of people who see the best in her, want the best and most for her, and who really see her. That's harder today than ever with the pandemic limiting traditional social interactions. It's like I'm trying to front load all the good stuff to give her the emotional and psychological tools that she will need to flourish no matter what is thrown at her. I work to manage the chaos that would otherwise thwart her potential. Phase 1 includes unconditional love, a physically and emotionally safe home, clear boundaries and routines, and laughter every day. So far, our strategy beyond just lots of love and a safe environment is to recognize whatever interests and aptitude Leilani seems to demonstrate and to encourage and develop those as best we can. She loves to sing and dance, so we make up songs for every occasion, in the car, at bedtime. I have a video of her macaroni and cheese song that she composed on the way home from daycare several months ago in anticipation of her favorite dinner. We play music and have dance parties. We've discovered she especially likes dancing to up-tempo big band classics. She's extremely physical and agile, so Sharon takes her to the little gym where she learns tumbling, walks on the balance beam, and hangs on parallel bars. Little Jim even has a YouTube channel she enjoyed during the stay-at-home order period. She has a kitchen playset with over 130 food models and knows the names of most of them. She has a toolbox and always goes running for her hammer or a screwdriver to help when a home improvement project is underway. I also try to manage my expectations, being clear that people do not always develop passions for everything that they're good at. We know that she's exploring everything right now. I recognize that some of what I see as above average intelligence is probably the result of being the only child with two adults who talk to her all the time as if she was an adult with a limited vocabulary. We know that even with progress, our tender-hearted little girl will be disappointed, disillusioned, and hurt. When that happens, my prayer is that she will know that it is the world that is awry, and that she is talented, worthy, loving, and lovable. She will not settle for less. She will find a way around or through to her dreams and to justice. She will find forgiveness and love in her heart rather than bitterness, and she will overpower the hatred and indifference with the force of her spirit and convictions. This is my prayer. May it be so.
We've cleared off the table, leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some fall behind, some go in their own way and time. Some will with love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can't dream of a day never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by thoughts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they give the same back to you. Oh, you can be anybody you want to be. You can love whoever you will. You can travel any country where your heart beats, and know that I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
Welcome to This Time for All Ages, and this morning we are going to be talking about different kinds of protests. So in the last few years we've seen many instances of protests, and protests can be silent or they can be loud. We can yell or give someone the silent treatment. We can protest within our families, our marriages, our friendships. We can protest at work or at school. Usually we are protesting an idea or a behavior that we do not agree with. Some of you may have even been involved in some peaceful protests this summer here in Cleveland. We've had a lot. In the last few years, there have been several important protests by students. A high school student by the name of India Landry protested a rule that her school had that said that she had to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. She went to a high school in Texas. India said that she was inspired by the NFL players who took a knee and who protested silently at the beginning of games when the national anthem was played. She decided to begin her protest because she said, "I felt the flag doesn't represent what it stands for. Liberty and justice for all. And I don't feel what is going on in the country is fair. So it was my choice to remain seated silently." She said it was a silent protest. India said that she protested the pledge about 200 times without any incident in her school. But one day she engaged in the protest while she was in her principal's office. And the principal immediately expelled her from school and said, "We're kicking you out of here." And then apparently a school secretary also said, "This isn't the NFL." So India was expelled from her high school for refusing to stand, and she was ordered off the school grounds, and the principal threatened to call the police if she did not leave. India missed her graduation in 2018, not due to the COVID-19 virus, but because of her silent protest. Now, India was able to settle her lawsuit with the school principal because in 1943, the U.S. Supreme Court justices had already ruled that schools could not require students to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And the reasoning behind that was because if we make somebody stand for the flag salute, that means we're saying that the Bill of Rights, which is supposed to be guarding our individual right to speak our mind, is then left open to public authorities to compel people to speak something that is not in their mind, according to Justice Robert Jackson, who actually wrote about this ruling. He was one of the judges that decided about what is going to be fair or not fair in terms of our freedom of speech and the right to not be forced to engage in speech that we do not agree with. So the idea that I hope that you are thinking about this morning is that we do have the right in the United States to protest if we are being required to think in a way that is not aligned with our values, with our heart, with our conscience, for what we know to be true for ourselves. And so I'm asking you to think about, and maybe talk with your adults or people in your neighborhood, what freedom of speech means for you, both in terms of, one, allowing yourself to express an idea, and two, standing up for your right not to be forced to agree with an idea that you may not agree with. What does liberty mean to you? Our fifth principle declares that as Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations, but also within society at large. And right now, this right is being tested in the United States. So remember, protesting is essential to make sure democracy lives up to its potential. Protesting can create new rules and policies. It holds all of us, especially our elected officials, accountable to our highest ideals and our Constitution and Bill of Rights. When you do make a protest, you need to be really clear about what you're standing for, and it is your stand. And you need to be able to explain why you're taking this stand. I know many of us have been really upset all spring and summer that we still need to engage in so much protesting to make sure that our country becomes more fair and safe for everybody. But we can also feel glad that we are able to see change through protest. The protests that are happening around our country are making people more aware of things that are not fair. Recently, Boston's mayor, Marty Walsh, declared that racism is a public health crisis. The Black Lives Matter movement is gaining more and more ground, and we're seeing more cities beginning to look at law enforcement and shifting monies from police departments to activities that help people, like counseling services and drug rehabilitation. The NFL and Major League Baseball are actually changing the names, very racist names, of teams. So we are seeing change. So keep protesting. Hold our fifth principle dear.
Each week, we come together as a people. Together, we share stories, love, aspiration. We also share our bounty in ways that express our religious UU values. May this important ritual of sharing abundance remind us that making our world better is a task best shared.
To the People Who Have Mistaken Freedom for Liberation by Theresa Soto. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universes inside of everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise.
Merriam-Webster defines tyranny as cruel and oppressive government or rule, cruel, unreasonable, or arbitrary use of power or control, rule by one who has absolute power without legal right, or, in the words of comedian Brent Terhune, all these doctors better stop having my best interests at heart, 'cause that's tyranny. I'm hearing a lot about tyranny these days, especially when it comes to wearing masks. I make light of it here, but I'm also reminded of the tyranny that I understand, real tyranny. I grew up with people that came from communist Eastern Europe during the 1950s and 60s, the Ukrainian family who lived down the street, the Polish and Slovak immigrants who lived in my grandma's Chicago neighborhood. DPs, my grandma called them, her shorthand for displaced persons. There were clients of a brokerage firm I worked for, concentration camp survivors with numbers tattooed on their arms. And Mira in high school, who had escaped communist-controlled Croatia in the back of a hay wagon. These people knew tyranny. These people knew what it was like to not be able to live freely. Behind me, back there, are 3 shelves on my bookcase that are in witness of people that have lived under tyranny, under oppressive governments who ended up in prison camps, whose lives were turned upside down at a word. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was the first author I read. His Gulag Archipelago series helped me begin to understand why the neighbors and friends that came from those countries were the way they were. Mira was 20 when she came to my high school. It was in my sophomore year. She would often look at us in puzzlement and shake her head, thinking us frivolous. She dove into her studies and finished 4 years of high school in 2 years. I never understood her until I began to read the Gulag books and saw perhaps a glimpse into the life she must have had in Croatia. Ollie came from the Ukraine. He lived down the street. He and my dad were friends. It was hard for him to trust people because of the culture he grew up in. There, people disappeared in the middle of the night because of something they might have said. No one asked where they went, although everyone knew. His sister was a doctor. She was our pediatrician. Blonde hair worn in a French twist, pearl earrings, and a lovely smile. She always greeted us with, "Hello, Mommy. How are your beautiful girls today?" Yet there was a sadness about her that at the time I did not understand. Living most of their lives under tyranny, then coming to a place of freedom was a hard transition. Learning to trust was the hardest. Understanding came slowly that the secret police were not going to come knocking at your door in the middle of the night because you had said the wrong thing to one of your neighbors. And you were free to express opinions about the government, like protesting racial injustice, or like protesting not wearing masks. There was something about the people I knew that I saw repeated in the books I've read over the years. People who live under true tyranny and come to this country, to a place of freedom, to a place of liberty, have such a deep appreciation for these gifts something that we who have always known them can take for granted. Along with words like patriot, constitution, and freedom, tyranny is part of the lexicon currently used by the alt-right to rile up their base. To them, they are words that rouse the blood, stir patriotic fervor in hearts, and hark back to our brave forefathers who broke away from the tyranny of England and founded a new and brash young nation. They have become jingoistic words, invoked when people are asked to inconvenience themselves for the good of others. I've often thought I would like to sit these anti-maskers down with the people I grew up with to have a talk on what tyranny really is. These people lived most of their lives with the constant fear of offending a neighbor or coworker, or the slip of a tongue in a moment of frustration with the government. They told stories of people disappearing in the middle of the night, the knock at the door when you were asleep, the secret police dragging you out of bed, out into the night. The lucky ones were only detained for a short while, and they were few. The unlucky disappeared for many years, some for good. For many of those who made it to the free world, there was still fear, the uncertainty about what happened to the families they left behind, the silence they had to maintain to keep those people safe. Real tyranny is anathema to the human spirit. It holds down, holds back, crushes anything that tries to operate beyond its narrow view of how the world should be, how a culture should be. Living under tyranny is a forge, a crucible, which either changes and tempers or kills. Living under a culture of tyranny brings out the resiliency of the human spirit. I've read book after book about people who lived under communist regimes and who were incarcerated in prison camps. For each of them, there came a time when they made a choice whether to live or to die. There's a theme that runs through these books, these stories of survivors. It's best summed up this way. In The Guardian, in March of 2017, there was an article called How to Survive Tyranny, 10 Pieces of Advice from Turkey. One reader said, "Whenever I feel physically trapped, I think about the power of the thought. The mind is a beautiful and eternal place, and no one can ever reach it if you don't let them. Remember that the state is afraid of your thoughts. That is your power, and that is a huge and delightful thing." Knowing these stories, having read about what it is like to live under tyranny, it has always been my fervent hope that we will never know it in our lifetime. As I finished writing this piece, news came out of Portland, Oregon, that people who are peacefully protesting are being pulled off the street, put into vans, and taken off by people who claim to be federal law enforcement. And there is talk about sending these forces into the other U.S. cities, Chicago being the next target. This is how it begins. I fervently hope that I'm wrong. And perhaps those worried about the tyranny of masks should shift their focus to these events. I wish I could sit them down with those I have known so that they could hear firsthand about what it's like to live under real tyranny. But most of them are gone now, and it is sad that their stories may be lost with the passing of time. I think of them and what they went through, and I'm glad that most of them did not live to see these times.
We extinguish the chalice with these words by Maureen Killeran. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth.